A black single dad took his daughter to the beach just to escape the bills piling up at home. He didn't expect to see anyone he knew, especially not her, the CEO of his company, walking barefoot in the sand. She watched him hold his daughter. Then she said 7 words that changed his life forever. Maddox Thompson woke at 5 in the morning the same way he had for the past 5 years, alone in the dark, with his heart already racing before his feet touched the cold floor. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that doubled as a dining room. Everything in it carried the ghost of someone who used to be there. The coffee mug with the chipped handle that Sarah always meant to throw away. The photograph on the refrigerator of the 3 of them at the county fair, Mina, just 2 years old, sitting on her mother's shoulders. Maddox had thought about taking it down 100 times. He never did. He moved through the darkness with practiced silence, careful not to wake Mina. The coffee maker gurgled to life. He opened his laptop on the kitchen counter, scrolling through work emails while the pot filled. One subject line made his stomach drop. Company-wide restructuring, mandatory meeting Monday. He had heard the rumors for weeks. The new CEO was cleaning house, cutting costs, making examples. Maddox's department had already lost 2 people last month, and the whispers in the hallways said more names were coming. He closed the laptop, stared at the black screen. 34 years old, widower, single father, black man in a company where the leadership board looked like a country club photograph from 1955. If they needed someone expendable, someone who wouldn't make noise, someone who had spent years making himself small on purpose, they would find him first. He poured his coffee and sat at the table surrounded by bills he had arranged into careful stacks. Electric, insurance, Mina's school fees, the medical debt that still followed him like a shadow. The memory crept in before he could stop it. 3 years ago, the oncologist's office, Sarah sitting beside him, her hand cold in his while a man in a white coat explained that the cancer had spread. Stage 4. They would do everything they could, but the prognosis was measured in months, not years. Maddox had squeezed her hand and said, "We'll fight this together." Sarah had looked at him with those calm eyes and whispered, "Promise me you'll take care of Mina. Promise me you won't let this break you." He had promised. And 6 months later, he buried her. The numbers on the bills blurred. Maddox blinked hard, pushing the memory away. He didn't have time for grief. He had never had time for grief. A small voice broke through the silence. "Daddy." Maddox looked up. Mina stood in the doorway, her stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand, her eyes still heavy with sleep. She was 7 years old with her mother's quiet strength and his stubborn hope. And every time he looked at her, he saw both the best thing he had ever done and the weight of everything he could not afford to lose. "Hey, baby girl." He forced his voice to soften. "What are you doing up so early?" "I heard you." She walked toward him, climbed onto his lap without asking. "You were making your worry sounds." "My worry sounds when you breathe like this." She demonstrated short, shallow breaths through her nose. "You do it when you're scared about something." Maddox felt his chest tighten. He wrapped his arms around her, pulled her close. "I'm not scared," he lied. "Daddy's just thinking." Mina was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question she had been asking every weekend for the past month. "Can we go somewhere today? Somewhere fun?" Maddox thought about the stack of bills, the email waiting on his laptop, the meeting on Monday that might end everything. Then he thought about his daughter's face, the way she had been watching him lately, careful and quiet, like she was afraid of asking for too much. 7 years old, and she had already learned not to want things. "Yeah," he said. "Let's go to the beach." Her face lit up. "Really?" "Really. Just you and me." She hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. That afternoon, they drove 40 minutes to the coast. The beach was public free, the kind of place where families spread out on old blankets and kids chased waves with plastic buckets. Maddox found a spot away from the crowds. He laid out the blanket he had brought from home, worn thin, faded blue, and set down the cooler with their lunch inside. Rice balls, homemade simple wrapped in plastic. It was what he could afford. Mina ran toward the water immediately, her laughter carried by the wind. Maddox sat on the blanket and watched her, the tension in his shoulders loosening for the first time in weeks. Here, no one knew he was drowning in debt. No one knew his job was hanging by a thread. No one looked at him and saw a problem to be solved or a quota to be filled. Here he was, just a man watching his daughter play. He closed his eyes, letting the sound of the waves wash over him. He had learned long ago that the world did not reward black men for excellence. It punished them for visibility. So he made himself invisible, kept his head down, did the work. Never complained, never demanded, never expected anything more than survival. And survival was exhausting. "Daddy, Daddy, look." He opened his eyes. Mina was pointing at a seashell she had found, holding it up like treasure. "That's beautiful, baby," he called back. She beamed and kept searching, adding to her collection. Maddox watched her for a long moment. Then his gaze drifted down the shoreline. A woman was walking alone along the edge of the water. No shoes, her pants rolled up to her calves, her hair loose in the wind. She moved slowly like someone who had forgotten how to rest and was trying to remember. Something about her seemed familiar. Maddox squinted against the sun, trying to place her. Then recognition hit him like a cold wave. Victoria Reynolds, the new CEO of Maxwell and Partners. The woman whose name was whispered in every hallway, every meeting room, every anxious conversation about who would be cut next. He had seen her exactly twice, once during the company-wide introduction when she took over 3 months ago, and once passing in the corridor while she walked with the board of directors, her face unreadable, her presence commanding. In the office, she was armor and authority. Tailored suits, sharp eyes, a reputation for making decisions quickly and without sentiment. Here, she looked like someone carrying a weight no one else could see. Maddox's first instinct was to look away, pretend he hadn't seen her, gather Mina and move to a different part of the beach before she noticed him. But it was already too late. Mina came running back toward him, breathless and smiling, her arms full of shells, and she ran directly into Victoria's path. "Daddy, Daddy, look what I found." Victoria stopped, looked down at the little girl who had nearly collided with her, then looked up at Maddox. Their eyes met. Victoria's gaze moved from the little girl to Maddox, and something flickered across her face. Recognition, then surprise, then something softer that disappeared before he could name it. "I'm sorry," Maddox said, quickly getting to his feet. "Mina, come here." But Mina was already showing Victoria her shells, oblivious to the tension in her father's voice. "Look, I found this one by the big rock, and this one has sparkles inside." Victoria knelt down to Mina's level, her expression shifting in a way Maddox had never seen in the office. "They're beautiful. You have a good eye. My daddy says the ocean makes them smooth. It takes a long time, like forever. Your daddy's right." Maddox stood frozen, unsure whether to apologize, excuse himself, or pretend none of this was happening. In that moment, Mina ran back to him and tugged at his hand. "Daddy, I'm hungry." He led her back to the blanket, painfully aware that Victoria was still nearby. He opened the cooler and pulled out the rice balls he had made that morning, simple, wrapped in plastic, nothing compared to the elaborate picnic spread the family next to them had laid out. Mina looked at the rice balls. Then she looked at the other family's pizza, their sandwiches, their colorful containers of fruit. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Maddox felt the familiar ache of inadequacy settle into his chest. He had worked overtime last week. He had skipped lunch 3 days in a row, and still he couldn't give his daughter a meal that didn't make her feel different. He knelt beside her, keeping his voice light. "Hey, you know what? These aren't just any rice balls. These are magic rice balls. Princess food." Mina tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Daddy, I'm not a little kid anymore." Before Maddox could respond, a shadow fell over them. Victoria stood there holding a brown paper bag. I bought too much lunch earlier. I have an extra sandwich if your daughter would like it. Maddox's pride flared. He opened his mouth to refuse, but then he saw Mina's face. Hope. Pure, uncomplicated hope. He swallowed his pride. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Victoria handed the sandwich to Mina, who unwrapped it carefully like it was a gift. Thank you, Mina said softly. Then she looked up at Victoria with those observant eyes. Do you want to sit with us? You look lonely. Maddox's heart stopped. Mina. But Victoria was already lowering herself onto the edge of the blanket, her expression unguarded in a way that made her look younger, more human. Is that okay? She asked Maddox. He nodded, not trusting his voice. They sat in silence for a while, watching Mina eat. The waves rolled in and out. Seagulls called overhead. She's wonderful, Victoria said quietly. How old? 7. Just turned 7 last month. You're raising her alone? Maddox's jaw tightened. Her mother passed away 5 years ago. Victoria didn't offer the usual condolences, the hollow, I'm so sorry that people said when they didn't know what else to say. Instead, she just nodded like she understood that some losses were too big for words. Mina finished her sandwich and ran back to the water's edge, leaving them alone on the blanket. I recognize you, Victoria said. From the office. Maddox braced himself. Yes, ma'am. Maddoxating Department. Mid-level creative. I've seen your work. She watched Mina splash in the shallow waves. The Unseen Voices campaign last year. That was yours, wasn't it? Even though someone else took credit. Maddox felt his pulse quicken. He had never told anyone, never complained, never demanded recognition. How did you know? The question escaped before he could stop it. Victoria's lips curved slightly. I asked around. People talk when they think no one important is listening, and assistants remember everything. Maddox didn't know how to respond. It's fine, he finally said. That's just how it goes sometimes. Victoria turned to look at him directly. Does it have to be? He didn't answer. Mina came running back then, throwing herself into Maddox's arms, sandy and breathless and laughing. He held her tight, pressing his face into her hair, breathing in the salt and sunshine. Victoria watched them, and when Mina pulled back, still giggling, Victoria spoke. Her voice was quiet but certain. You don't have to prove anything. 7 words. Maddox looked at her, not understanding. Excuse me. I've watched people work twice as hard for half the recognition their entire careers. I've done it myself. Her eyes held his. I see you. The way you love your daughter. The way you carry everything alone without asking for help. The way you've made yourself small because you think that's the only way to survive. She leaned forward slightly. You don't have to prove anything. Not to them. Not to anyone. You're already enough. Maddox felt something crack open inside his chest, not breaking, releasing. Like a door he had kept locked for years had suddenly swung open. No one had ever said that to him. Not his father, who taught him that black men had to be twice as good to get half as far. Not his teachers, who praised his work, but warned him not to expect too much. Not even Sarah, who loved him completely, but never fully understood the invisible weight he carried. You're already enough. He didn't know how to respond, so he just knotted his throat too tight for words. And for the first time in 5 years, Maddox Thompson felt seen. Monday morning arrived like a cold splash of water. Maddox walked into Maxwell and Partners at 8 o'clock sharp his weekend at the beach, already feeling like a distant dream. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The elevator smelled like stale coffee and anxiety. Everything was the same. The whispered conversations about layoffs, the careful way people avoided eye contact, the unspoken hierarchy that placed him somewhere near the bottom, talented enough to keep around, invisible enough to overlook. He passed Victoria in the hallway once. She was surrounded by executives, her face sharp and professional, her posture commanding. She didn't look at him. Maddox told himself it didn't matter. Whatever happened on the beach was a moment out of time, a brief intersection of two worlds that were never meant to touch. She was the CEO. He was nobody. He sat at his desk and opened his laptop, prepared to disappear into his work the way he always did. That same evening, 23 floors above the city, Victoria Reynolds stood alone in her penthouse apartment. The space was beautiful, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, designer furniture arranged with mathematical precision, a kitchen with appliances she never used, a dining table for 8 where no one ever sat. She poured herself a glass of wine and walked to the window. On the shelf behind her sat a photograph. She couldn't bring herself to put away herself at 30, smiling next to a man who had once promised to love her forever. David, her ex-husband, the man who had supported her ambitions until they exceeded his own, then slowly poisoned everything they had built together. "You care more about that company than you care about us," he had said the night before he left. "I'm building something," she had replied. "Why can't you understand that?" "Because building something means nothing if you have no one to share it with." The divorce was finalized 8 months later. Victoria threw herself into work with even more intensity, climbing higher, pushing harder, until she reached the corner office she had always wanted. And now she had it. The title, the power, the respect. She also had an empty apartment and a silence so loud it kept her awake at night. Victoria sipped her wine and thought about the man on the beach, the way he had looked at his daughter like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. The gentle way he had turned a simple lunch into something magical even when he clearly had so little. She had given up the idea of children years ago, told herself it was a sacrifice worth making, told herself she couldn't be both a CEO and a mother, but watching Maddox with Mina, she had felt something she hadn't felt in years. Longing. She finished her wine and went to bed alone, the city lights glittering outside her window like stars she could never quite reach. That night, Mina was full of questions. "Daddy, who was the sandwich lady," Maddox looked up from the dishes he was washing. "Just someone I work with." "Is she your boss?" "Kind of, yes." Mina tilted her head, considering this. "She looked at you funny." "Funny how?" "Like she could see you, not just looking at you, but really seeing you." Mina climbed onto the kitchen stool, her face thoughtful. "Most people don't see you, Daddy. They look, but they don't see." She was different. Maddox stared at his daughter. 7 years old, and she understood things that grown men missed entirely. "Go brush your teeth," he said softly. "It's almost bedtime." 3 days later, the email arrived. "Ms. Reynolds would like to see you in her office at 3 o'clock this afternoon." Maddox read it 4 times. Then he began cleaning out his desk. By 2:45, he had removed every personal item. The photograph of Mina, the coffee mug Sarah had given him on their anniversary, the small plastic dinosaur Mina had snuck into his bag last year. He was ready to be let go. Victoria's office was on the top floor, all glass and clean lines and expensive furniture. Maddox stood in the doorway, feeling like an intruder in a world where he didn't belong. "Sit down," Victoria said. Her voice was professional, but not cold. He sat. "I've been reviewing personnel files for the past 3 months," she began, "looking at performance potential contributions that may have been overlooked." Here it comes, Maddox thought. The part where she explains why they have to let me go. The Unseen Voices campaign generated a 23% increase in brand engagement. The strategy for the Henderson account saved the company over $200,000. The creative direction for the nonprofit initiative won an industry award. She looked at him steadily. "All of your work, all credited to other people." Maddox said nothing. "I'm not asking you to confirm or deny. I already verified it." She leaned back in her chair. "I'm offering you a promotion, creative lead, your own team, your own voice." Maddox felt the floor shift beneath him. "I don't understand," he said. You thought I was going to fire you." Her expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I'm not. I'm asking you to stop hiding." His mind raced. The money would change everything. The title would mean respect. The opportunity was everything he had never dared to want. But old fears died hard. Why me? The question came out sharper than he intended. Is this because of the beach? Because you felt sorry for me? Victoria's eyes flashed. On the beach, I saw a good father. Today, I'm talking to a talented professional who has been overlooked for too long. Don't confuse the two. Maddox wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to believe her. I need to think about it, he said. She nodded. Take the weekend. That night, Maddox couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every possible outcome. The promotion could change his life, or it could be a setup, a way to make him visible just long enough to knock him down. He had seen it happen before. The token hire. The diversity initiative that looked good on paper but disappeared when budgets got tight. Hope was dangerous. Hope had told him Sarah would survive. He remembered sitting in the hospital room, holding her hand while the machines beeped their steady rhythm. The doctors had said she was responding to treatment. They had said there was reason for optimism. And then 3 weeks later, everything collapsed at once. The infection, the complications, the moment when the monitors screamed and nurses rushed in and Maddox was pushed into the hallway helpless, watching through a window as they tried to bring her back. They couldn't. Hope had lied to him before. Why should he trust it now? In the morning, Mina found him sitting at the kitchen table, his coffee untouched. She climbed into his lap without a word. You tell me to be brave, she said quietly. But are you brave, Daddy? Maddox looked at his daughter. Her mother's determination stared back at him, full of a wisdom that shouldn't belong to someone so young. I'm trying, he said. Trying isn't the same as doing. She hugged him and went to get ready for school. And Maddox sat alone with a truth he could no longer ignore. He had spent so long protecting himself from disappointment that he had forgotten how to reach for anything at all. He took the promotion. He told himself he would be professional, keep his distance, demonstrate his value through work alone. But Victoria made it difficult. She stayed late when he stayed late. She asked his opinion in meetings. She looked at him in a way that made him feel less like an employee and more like an equal. One night, weeks into his new position, they found themselves alone in the empty office. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. Maddox looked up from his laptop. Of course. Do you ever get tired of it? The constant performance, the feeling that one mistake will confirm everything they already think about you. The question hit him somewhere deep. Every day, he admitted. But I don't know any other way. Victoria set down her pen. My marriage ended because my ex-husband couldn't handle my success. He said I cared more about the company than about us. Maybe he was right. Her voice grew quiet. I gave up the idea of having children because I thought I couldn't be both a mother and a CEO. I told myself I was making a strategic decision. But the truth is, I was just scared. She looked at him vulnerable in a way he had never seen. Sometimes I wonder if any of it was worth it. Maddox studied her face, the exhaustion beneath the polish, the loneliness she usually hid behind authority. You don't have to prove anything either, he said softly. Victoria's breath caught. She recognized her own words reflected back. Something shifted between them. The air grew thick with possibility. Maddox stood. I should go. Mina's waiting. Victoria nodded, but her eyes followed him as he gathered his things. At the door, he turned back. Thank you, he said, for seeing me. He left before either of them could say anything they weren't ready to say. But something had changed. A barrier had cracked, and neither of them could pretend it hadn't. The call came at 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday. Maddox was in a meeting presenting the new campaign strategy to his team when his phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. The third time, he excused himself and stepped into the hallway. Mr. Thompson, This is Mercy General Hospital. Your daughter Mina was brought in by the school nurse about an hour ago. She has a high fever and—" He didn't hear the rest. He was already running. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and fear. Maddox burst through the emergency room doors, his heart pounding so hard he could barely speak. A nurse directed him to the pediatric wing, third floor, room 312. Mina looked so small in the hospital bed. Tubes connected to her arm monitors, beeping steadily, her face flushed with fever. She was asleep, her breathing shallow but steady. Maddox collapsed into the chair beside her bed and took her hand. The doctor explained it was a severe respiratory infection, serious but treatable. They needed to keep her overnight for observation, maybe longer if the fever didn't break. Maddox nodded, but he barely heard the words. All he could see was Mina, small and fragile in a hospital bed. The same sterile smell, the same beeping machines, the same feeling of helplessness. He had made promises in a room like this, promises to Sarah that everything would be okay, promises to himself that he would be strong enough to carry whatever came next. But strength was just another word for pretending you weren't falling apart. He pressed Mina's hand to his forehead and closed his eyes. Please. Not her. Not my little girl. Please. He didn't know how much time had passed when he heard footsteps at the door. Victoria stood in the doorway, still in her work clothes, holding a paper bag. Her face was tight with worry. HR told me what happened, she said quietly. I came as soon as I could. Maddox stared at her. You didn't have to come. I know. She stepped into the room. But I wanted to. She sat in the chair on the other side of Mina's bed, setting the bag on the floor. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. The machines beeped. Mina slept. She's going to be okay, Victoria said. It wasn't a question. The doctors say the infection is responding to treatment. Maddox's voice was hollow. They say she'll be fine. But you don't believe them. He looked at her, his eyes raw. The last time I sat in a hospital room like this, they told me my wife would be fine too. Victoria didn't offer empty reassurances. She just reached across Mina's bed and laid her hand over his. They stayed like that, silent as the sun set outside the window. Mina woke up just after 7 o'clock. Her eyes fluttered open, confused at first, then focusing on her father's face. Daddy, I'm here, baby, I'm right here. She turned her head slowly and saw Victoria sitting on the other side of the bed. A weak smile crossed her face. The sandwich lady? Victoria laughed a real laugh, surprised and warm. You remember me? You made Daddy happy. Mina's voice was hoarse but clear. At the beach. He smiled different after he talked to you. Maddox felt his throat tighten. Victoria leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair from Mina's forehead. How are you feeling, sweetheart? Tired, and my throat hurts. Mina looked between them, her 7-year-old mind working. Are you Daddy's friend now? Victoria glanced at Maddox. I'd like to be, if that's okay. Mina nodded solemnly. Good. Daddy doesn't have enough friends. Maddox almost laughed. Even sick in a hospital bed, his daughter was looking out for him. Later that night, after Mina had fallen back asleep, Maddox and Victoria sat in the hallway outside her room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A nurse passed by, her shoes squeaking on the linoleum. I haven't let myself believe in anything good for a long time, Maddox said. His voice was barely above a whisper. Every time I've allowed myself to hope, I've lost. Sarah, my confidence, my belief that effort actually matters. He stared at his hands. I'm terrified that if I let myself believe in this in you, I'll lose again. And this time, Mina will be the one who suffers. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I've spent my entire adult life building defenses, she finally said. After my divorce, I told myself that achievement was enough, that I didn't need anyone, that letting people close only gave them the power to destroy me. She turned to face him. But defenses don't just keep the bad things out, Maddox. They keep the good things out too. She took his hand. I don't know where this goes. I don't have guarantees. but I know that walking away because I'm scared would be the biggest mistake I've ever made." Maddox looked at her, really looked at her, not the CEO, not the powerful woman in the corner office, just Victoria, tired and hopeful and brave enough to reach for something uncertain. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "Then let's be scared together." They didn't rush. Victoria understood that Mina had to come first, that trust had to be built slowly, that Maddox had spent 5 years learning to survive alone, and unlearning that would take time. She started showing up in small ways. Picking Mina up from school when Maddox had a late meeting, bringing dinner on weeknights when he was too exhausted to cook, reading bedtime stories while Maddox dozed on the couch, finally allowing himself to rest. Mina warmed to her gradually. At first she called her Miss Victoria. Then, as the weeks passed, it became Miss Vic. One evening, about 3 months after the hospital, the three of them were having dinner together when Mina looked up from her plate. "Mom, Vic, can you pass the salt?" The words hung in the air. Mina's eyes went wide, her face flushed red. "I mean Miss Vic. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Victoria's eyes glistened. She reached across the table and took Mina's hand. "It's okay, sweetheart. You can call me whatever feels right." Maddox watched them, his heart so full it ached. That night, after Mina was asleep, Maddox found Victoria standing on his small balcony looking up at the stars. "She called you Mom," he said. Victoria nodded, not turning around. "I never thought I'd hear that word directed at me. I gave up on that dream a long time ago." Maddox stepped closer. "Do you regret it? The choices you made?" She finally turned to face him. "I used to. But now I think maybe I was just waiting for the right moment, for the right people." She smiled soft and real. "For you and Mina." He pulled her into his arms and she let him. A few weeks later, Mina said something that made Maddox realize how far they had all come. They were getting ready for bed, and Mina was unusually quiet. Maddox sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her blanket. "What's on your mind, baby girl?" Mina looked up at him with those serious eyes. "Daddy, I'm not scared anymore." "Scared of what?" "That you'll disappear, like Mommy did." She reached for his hand. "I used to be so scared that one day you'd just be gone and I'd be all alone, but now Miss Vic is here, and she helps you stay." Maddox felt tears prick at his eyes. "I was never going to leave you, Mina." "I know, but it's different now. Before it was just you and me, and you were so tired all the time. So sad." She squeezed his hand. "Now you smile. Real smiles. And I know that even if something bad happens, we won't be alone." Maddox gathered her into his arms and held her tight. His little girl, who had learned too young that people could disappear, had finally found safety again. One year after the day they met on the beach, Maddox drove Mina and Victoria back to the same spot. The same sand, the same waves, the same stretch of shoreline where everything had changed. But everything was different now. Mina ran toward the water, immediately laughing as the waves chased her feet. Victoria spread out a blanket, a new one, bright and colorful, and sat down beside Maddox. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Maddox watched his daughter play, then turned to look at the woman beside him. "A year ago I came here to escape. I was drowning in bills and fear and the feeling that I would never measure up. I thought the best I could hope for was one quiet afternoon before everything fell apart." He took her hand. "I never imagined I'd find you." Victoria leaned into him. "Do you remember what I said to you that day?" "Every word," he smiled. "You told me I didn't have to prove anything." "Do you believe it now?" Maddox considered the question. A year ago, the answer would have been no. He had spent his whole life trying to earn his place in a world that seemed determined to overlook him, trying to be twice as good for half the recognition, trying to demonstrate that he deserved to exist. But somewhere along the way, he had stopped performing and started simply living. "Yeah," he said, "I think I finally do." Victoria kissed him softly. You know what changed? What? You stopped trying to earn love, and you let yourself receive it. Mina came running back, breathless, and Sandy throwing herself between them. Group hug, she demanded. They wrapped their arms around her, laughing. 3 people who had each been alone in their own way. 3 people who had found each other on a beach, in a hospital, in the quiet moments of ordinary life. Maddox looked out at the ocean. The same water. The same horizon. But he wasn't the same man who had sat here a year ago, carrying the world on his shoulders, believing he had to earn every breath. He didn't need to prove anything anymore. He just needed to be here, with his daughter, with the woman he loved. That was enough. That had always been enough. Maddox spent years believing he had to earn his place in the world. He thought love was something you worked for, not something you deserved. It took 7 words from a stranger to remind him of a truth he had forgotten. You don't have to prove anything. You are already enough. Maybe you felt the same way. Maybe you've spent your whole life trying to be good enough for people who never saw you. Maybe you're still waiting for permission to stop performing and start living. So let me ask you this. What would change in your life if you truly believed you were enough, not because of what you do, but because of who you are? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below and tell me. Have you ever had a moment when someone's words changed everything for you? Or are you still waiting for that moment? And if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Sometimes 7 words can change a life. Sometimes it only takes 1. Thank you for being here.